Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. We are joined today by David Corbett, and he is here to talk about Done for a Dime, a novel, we'll call it a crime novel after a while and then correct it, which is now in trade paperback, published by Ballantine Books. Thanks for stopping by.
Jim, thanks for having me.
You know, when the hardcover was out, it was a book I wanted to do, and I'm so glad you're recirculating, if you'll excuse the expression. And it's, so nice to have you back. And, of course, it's even nicer to be a New York Times Notable Book of the Year.
That was a nice Christmas gift.
That was good. And then for them to tack on that the book is dazzling. And the beauty of Corbett's seductive style is that for all the lyricism of his narration and all the compassion he shows his characters, he never strays too far from the blunt vigor of California noir. Now, I'm not sure what blunt vigor is. I've got a good notion what California noir is, and it is that, and it's a fine, fine book.
Well, when that came out, I sent emails to my friends going, blunt and vigorous, that's me all over. And
that's great. Now, the other thing that I see from the press notes here is that this book is nominated for the McCavity Award as Best Novel of 2003. Is that the best novel in general or the best crime novel? Or?
That's a selection of crime novels. Yes, the McCavity nominees.
If I could ask you, it's now 2004, when are they going to decide?
This will be October, first week of October. Those awards, the Anthony, the McCavity, the Seamus, and the Barry are all awarded at a conference called BoucherCon, which is named for Anthony Boucher, the former reviewer for the New York Times Mystery Fiction.
Right, yeah.
And they all get awarded that 1 week. The only one that comes out before that is the Edgar, and that's usually, I think, in April or May of every year.
Now, for the group, do they gather in one place and throw stones at one another when they leave?
No, they gather in one place and throw cocktails back down their very unlubricated throats for several days at a time. In fact, everyone says, go to the conference and just hang out at the cocktail lounge because that's where everything happens. And they're right.
I wish you luck with that award. I do have a problem with it in the sense that it is a crime novel award. And I think that your book kind of bursts through whatever you might call that genre or something. For example, this book has a lot to say about music, which I found absolutely fascinating. All the way up on page 2, the fellow who is the corpse, and I think we should lay that ground. Raymond Strong Carlyle made his mark as an A sideman and the biggest names in R&B. Now he lies in the mud outside his home, shot dead from behind. And that's essentially the way the book opens.
That's true. Let's let everybody know that that's the cover copy. I didn't write that.
Well, your stuff is better, but that's not bad for a cover copy.
For a cover copy, that's not bad. No, not at all.
All right, so in a sense, that it begins with the murder
exactly
of that fellow. And as he's lying there, there's a kind of reminiscence that he has about being a traveling jazz musician and how he would not go out with the boys to the bar afterwards, but would go off by himself in order to come down, go to his hotel room, and then something like this might happen. Lying awake with a smoke arm behind his head, he justified his loneliness, this strange madness, by saying it's an honest business, the pursuit of this sound that isn't a sound. The beckoning silence, it's the reason he played, the reason he never given up. Never just said yes to the woman in the first place, telling himself, I can live with this. And this gets a name called Deep Sweet.
I talked to some musicians. There's a notion that musicians have that when they're really on their game, that there's this feeling that you get, that you somehow connected with something very real. And they all have various names for it. I've heard it called the deep. I came up with Deep Sweet. Got in an argument with my late wife over that one. She thought that was too wordy. 2 words was too many. But that was what I came up with. I've gotten very, very good feedback from musicians about this book. It's been very gratifying to get that. And they've all connected with that particular sentiment in particular.
And the same theme is repeated later on in the book when his son talks about getting this notion from his father. The deep, sweet music is a living thing, his father said. Inside every piece you ever play, there's a pulse, a real one, not made up in your head. In the music itself, it's your duty to find it and to connect. And that's really wonderful stuff. I mean, musicians like this.
Oh, yeah. No, some of them have corrected me on a few minor faults and technical details, but other than that, they have really embraced the book. It's been pretty gratifying.
Did it like a description of reeds or something?
Well, actually, no, there was one took to task my use of the term modal melody.
Who melody?
Modal.
Modal melody. That's not kosher?
Well, he said the tune I described as modal was actually in 2 keys. Modal is only 1 key, and the 2 keys were F major and F minor. And I thought, I think that's a detail my readers will be able to live with.
Oh, boy. Done for a Dime is a great mystery and much more as far as I'm concerned. For one thing, it's populated by some extremely strong women.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
It's David Corbett Day on Conversations on the Coast. He's here to talk about Done for a Dime, and a novel that's been out for a while, now in trade paperback. He's been good enough to stop by, I think, on his way to a place called Grass Valley.
Yeah, I have a reading tonight up at the bookseller in Grass Valley.
Wonderful. One of the media that liked your book a lot is the Chicago Tribune. They said, a terrific mystery. I'll accept that. Corbett does people beautifully. And that's what I'm interested in, because among the people you do beautifully, I think, are the women in this book. For example, there is a woman by the name of Serena Thigpen. Serena Thigpen is a black nurse in a white convalescent home. And here's how she talks about that place. Serena knew better. In fact, as she saw it, the exact opposite was true. They meant it all too well. That is, their nasty remarks about her. They'd been harboring the bile in their hearts their whole lives, and only a quirk of fate, one stroke too many, kept them from being able to keep up the pretense all the way to the grave. Every time she got called everything else imaginable, the women, as bad as the men, worse sometimes, she reminded herself that this was the real them. I loved her.
She was an amazing lady. And when I was working as a private investigator here in San Francisco, as well as when I was working in the law practice with my wife up in Vallejo, I met a lot of women like that, incredibly strong mothers who nevertheless just sometimes found it impossibly hard to keep their sons out of trouble. And yet were still incredibly devoted to those families, fought as hard as they could, some of the most hardworking human beings I've ever met in my life, and who have suffered some of the most humiliating indignities, but either because of church or their own characters, just suck it up and say, I got to keep my focus on what I got to do, and that's keeping my family together, protecting my own, doing what I got to do, and keeping one foot in front of the other.
Church is extremely, extremely important in that context, I think.
Oh, yeah, very.
From what I see. There's another woman, similar, I would guess, Cavella Grimes, who talks about her nephew Francis, who's not a nice boy, but she talks about him. Francis has already paid handsomely any debt to society honestly owed for mistakes he made, and they were mistakes, detective, not crimes. He has put that all behind him, moved on, and done well for others as well as himself. For me, he has been my friend, my companion, my helper. Any further attempt to punish him is nothing short of sadistic. Now, he could be a 3-time loser in the context of this novel, but she, in other passages too, presents the whole sociological milieu in which a boy like Francis grew up, and says, hey, guys, it's your fault at least as much as it is his fault or my fault.
Well, she was based on 2 women I knew. One was head of the Democratic Party in Vallejo, an incredibly impressive lady who testified in a trial that we had. And then there was another lady in San Francisco called the Jazz Lady, who I'd read about, and then who unfortunately got murdered by one of the kids that she had tried to take in. And she opened her house at 3 o'clock every day for kids to come over to her house, and she would play Duke Ellington, Dinah Washington, Count Basie. She would get these kids into jazz, and she was a marvelous force in the neighborhood. And I just sort of melded those two women together into this one lady. And it is amazing how many people have really taken to Carvella. She's a really amazing character. Has never been married because her fiance died in the Port Chicago.
Died in the Port Chicago thing. Yeah.
And has remained celibate her entire life. This tiny little woman with this spirit that's huge, and who takes on this detective nose to nose. I mean, there's no cop that's going to back her down.
Yeah, she really goes at it head to head. Really, really, really nice. Speaking of diminutive women, I think the other one that comes to mind is, I don't know how you say this, Nadia Lazarenko.
Yes.
Now she's in a sense, to me, she comes across as the most complex of the women. I mean, it's really clear where Thigpen is coming from, and Grimes and so on, and Nadia more complex, at least to me.
Well, and she's also the youngest. So and one of the things that forms her complexity, she's trying to discover who she is. She's a classically trained musician. She's 19 years old. She studied for the Tchaikovsky competition, and that was based very much on my late wife, who studied for the Tchaikovsky competition and then left it because she felt she was just becoming a trained monkey.
Mm-hmm.
Those are actually her words. And I use that as somebody who wanted to learn jazz and boogie-woogie, and she ends up falling in love with the victim, Strong Carlisle's son, Toby Marchand, who's a jazz musician. And their musical connection is at the core of their fondness for each other. It's their way of communicating to each other.
There's a wonderful, I don't know what to call it, a footnote that you have in a couple of places in the book where you show the relationship between classical music and jazz. That's just wonderful. Done for a Dime, for all its other virtues, and I think they are many, is at its center about crime, cops and crime solving. And we're going to focus on these matters when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster, having a very good time talking to David Corbett about his good crime novel called Done for a Dime. And we'll prove it's a crime novel now. We'll talk about what the Rocky Mountain News said. Done for a Dime starts out sharp and never loses its edge as the action becomes more intense. Corbett doesn't blow a wrong note in what is one of the best police novels of the year. There you go, a little more narrower genre. Each character who marches through these pages is believable and fascinating. Corbett's knowledge of police and the murky world they inhabit makes this story a find. I won't want to miss his upcoming book. So you got one book sold on your next book. Okay, one copy. Keep that guy in mind. The Rocky Mountain News, whoever he is.
Unfortunately, he's a reviewer. He gets a free copy, so I'm out of luck.
Well, what about his mother?
I'll keep her in mind.
One of the women that I didn't get to in the second segment, and I want to get to her for a very simple reason, because I think it's a piece of great writing. And that is the description of one Tina Navigato.
Ah.
Tina Navigato. Tina is not black.
No.
Okay, it was the white woman, though, who stepped forward. She was a little zoftig, but voluptuous, not matronly. Murchison, that's the big detective, felt embarrassed by his arousal. No makeup, but her skin was flushed, and her eyes didn't need it. They were a stark, clear blue with thick lashes. She carried a briefcase, but wore sweats, and her black hair was finger-combed with renegade strands everywhere. She shot up from a deep sleep and at the sound of the phone, he guessed, dragged herself out from under the covers, thrown on whatever the tangled mess beside the bed. He pictured her hopping one-legged as she pulled on her socks. Strangely, the dishevelment made her more attractive. You could almost smell the sleep on her skin, and the next picture that came to mind was her crawling right back into bed, luxuriant, happy, naked, the queen of naps. That's great. I love it. She goes on to become a very, hardworking and efficient lawyer.
Right.
But I like that.
Thank you.
She's very nice person.
My wife had a estate planning and probate practice, and she was Italian, so there was also some borrowing there. Yeah. And but she was not a queen of naps, just so we get that clear. But that's borrowed from other people. But one thing I thought I might use as a story vehicle down the road is we did have, as I said, estate planning and probate, or as Terry would put it, families, death, and money. And there's always a story there. And what's amazing is that the smaller the amount of money, the more vicious they fight. And we may be seeing more of Tina in the future. I like her as a character, and there's just too much. There's too much stuff that comes out of those kind of situations not to use it. Great.
Well, I look forward to that.
Okay.
I look forward to that. Now let's get down to what some people, I guess, would call the essence. There's a lot of inside work, inside reporting, if you will, about cops, about a particular police department. The level of inefficiency and idiots in this department is quite high. Murchison is to say he's swimming upstream is to understate the case by a lot, I think.
Well, I wasn't out to make them out to be incompetent, but I was lucky enough to have a couple cop friends talk to me very candidly about their work, and also Jack Maples, who was in charge of, helped to be in charge of the New York Police Department when it made its turnaround under Giuliani. He made the statement that 90% of cops are really just occupying a desk. And my friend said that most of the guys that he knows on the force are really, they call them mobile secretaries. That really what they want to do is just get there and write up a report, and they never want to make an arrest. And they certainly never, because that's going to generate more paperwork, and they just don't really want to do the kind of stuff that you usually associate with cop work. And I just thought, well, okay, if I'm going to get that candid take on things, I might as well take it and run with it. And so I make Murchison, my cop, one of those guys who is trying against all of this inertia to really get something done. And in a small-time department, sometimes that can really, really be difficult.
Yeah, it's not only the guys not wanting to do stuff, it's the guys who, when they do stuff, do bad stuff.
Or do it incorrect,
like his partner, whose name I can never figure out.
Staluka.
Oh, Staluka. You throw an extra vowel in there. It's spelled Stluka. The interviewer had a hard time with that, I want to tell you.
Well, you're not the first. Slutka has been thrown around quite a bit, and I have to correct a lot of people. But no, Staluka. Actually, it was a Polish family in my parish when I was growing up in Columbus, Ohio.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. But it really is. So the book gives you all kinds of things. It gives you an inside look at a police department and how it functions or misfunctions. It gives you insight into one cop trying to make it work, and a heck of a lot more around issues of music, the importance of women in the black community, and a lot of other stuff that makes for a great read. This has been Conversations on the Coast. I'm Jim Foster. Our guest, David Corbett. The book, go get it, done for a dime.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.